Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Every touch is a step forward. By Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom. And by Real Good Foods. Real food you feel good about eating.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, with holiday travel gearing up, why not check in with someone who travels the world? Jason Viglione is always on a plane, train, or car for business and has figured out his own best practices for pump, CGM, and the whole routine, including when he changes time zones.
I don't mess with the timing on my pump, my body, everything stays the same. So at 7 p.m. New York time is when the pump rings, and it's when my body's at 72 hours. It's exactly that. And then I work around it.
Jason was diagnosed just last year. His anniversary date is coming up in January. Like a lot of adults, he had trouble getting the right diagnosis. We'll hear that story and a lot more. In Tell Me Something Good, a cameo in a Hallmark Christmas movie, a diaversary celebrated in a big way, and some new independence, a small step for a child with type 1 diabetes that I think is worth celebrating. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of Diabetes Connections. I'm your host, Stacey Sims. We aim to educate and inspire about type 1 diabetes by sharing stories of connection. And this is the last full episode of 2019. Well, at least the last full planned episode. You never know what's going to happen. We will have a very short episode the week after Christmas and Hanukkah. You know, the show airs on Tuesday, so it'll be New Year's Eve. But between now and the end of the year, other than that short episode, which won't have the regular segments and all that stuff, I don't plan on anything, but you never know. Longtime listeners may remember, and just part of the diabetes community, you may know, it seems like at this time of year, I don't know if the FDA is clearing its desk or people just want to get stuff done before the end of the year, or there are actual deadlines and protocols. But sometimes you get these sneaky end of the year approvals. So there's a couple of things in the pipeline that, of course, we're all waiting for. If anything like that happens, I will try my best to turn around a quick show and get you the news. Of course, stay in the Facebook group, Diabetes Connections, the group, or follow on social media for the updates. I did get a bunch of questions in the group and through email about Dexcom. And yes, I did reach out to Dexcom after the server issue, the outage they had a couple of weeks ago. I am in the process of setting up interviews, hopefully with either the CEO, Kevin Sayre, or the Chief Technical Officer, Jake Leach. I'll keep you posted. That may come before the end of the year. Frankly, I doubt it, with kind of reading between the lines of some of the messages I'm getting back. But you know I won't stop on that. We'll get them to come on and we will ask all of your questions. I'll definitely have a post in the group. I know what your questions are going to be because I think we all have the same questions, but I'll put it in the group anyway and let you chime in. Big thank you to Beyond Type 1. Their holiday gift guide came out recently, and The World's Worst Diabetes Mom was on it. We were the only book on it. So a huge thank you to Mary Lucas, who put that together, and all the folks at Beyond Type 1. And it's a great list. I'll link it up in the show notes. It's fun to see the products because we've talked to a lot of the people behind them. And now I have a couple of more people to track down. And this may go without saying, but I'll say it anyway. If there's a guest that we haven't had on, or a topic you'd like covered, please reach out and let me know. That's how I get some of my best ideas. People just sending me messages or posting in the group, hey, how about this person? Or even if you have a story you'd like to tell, that's what it's all about here. Love to tell your stories. And we have lots of great guests coming up, already booked, already taped some of them. Oh my goodness, I can't wait. Next year's going to be great. I just have more and more fun doing this show. Okay, well, we'll get to Jason Viglione's story in just a moment. Wait till you hear how much he travels. Oh, my goodness. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Handwriting your blood glucose levels is the ultimate throwback. The One Touch Vario Flex Meter seamlessly syncs with the free One Touch Reveal mobile app to create your dynamic electronic logbook. And when you choose the One Touch Reveal mobile app, you'll be joining thousands of other people living with diabetes. In fact, as of this past October, One Touch Reveal was the #1 downloaded diabetes management app in the US, Canada, France, and the UK. To upgrade today to the One Touch Vario Flex Meter and One Touch Reveal mobile app, visit diabetes-connections.com and click on the One Touch logo. My guest this week is one of those everyday people living with type 1. But like every everyday person, he has a story to tell. Jason Viglione was diagnosed almost a year ago, January 2019, just a few weeks before he turned 40. And you'll hear his story, not atypical of adults. He was initially misdiagnosed. Jason has a young son, and he travels for work all over the world. And when he's home, he has a very long commute, trains, cabs, walking. It's a lot of moving parts. I thought at this time of year, when a lot of us will be running to the airport or hitting the road, it would be fun to get some of his advice. Now, I need to say this. We are lay people having a conversation about what works for us. As I always say at the beginning of the show, this is not medical advice. Jason and I are not doctors. And I'm saying this because, as you will hear, he and Benny really do things that are definitely not FDA approved and probably not recommended by pump companies. I just want to give you a little heads up. I'll be honest, I'm really curious how many of you do some of the same things that we talk about here, and you will know it when you hear it. Okay, here's my chat with Jason Viglione. Jason, thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to learn from you about your experiences and about your travel. There's a lot to unpack here, but first, let me just confirm, you're not yet 1 year with type 1 as we're speaking, right?
That's right. January 17th will be my first diaversary.
Wow. All right. Well, you have jumped in with both feet and really taken a hold of this thing. Let's start by talking about your diagnosis. You made a joke off air that it was like your kind of a 40th birthday present. I'm sorry about that.
Happy birthday to me. Yeah, that's what happened. And this diagnosis, the right diagnosis, was actually the third in its series of misdiagnoses.
Oh, wow.
So several years ago, around 2013 or 14, I had just gotten out. I spent some time doing active duty military. And when I got out of the military, I had a doctor look me over, right, as a civilian again. And he said, I look at your test results. Congratulations. You're a diabetic. You'll never eat ketchup again. And basically walk out of the room.
Wait. You'll never eat ketchup?
Ketchup. Right.
This is the first sugary food he thought of?
Maybe he loves ketchup, but it was top of mind. I don't know.
Okay. I've never heard that one before, but all right, go ahead.
And as a result of the shock and the lack of bedside manner, my wife and I, who maybe wasn't even my wife at the time, we kind of dismissed it. I didn't really know what he meant, and it just didn't make a lot of sense. And I was angry at the delivery, and we let it be, which, I shouldn't have done, but I didn't know any better, and nobody helped me. And then my son was born in 2015, and I had a mortality crisis. I'm a daddy now, get healthy and cut all the junk out of my diet. And I started to drop weight pretty rapidly, and I was kind of exhausted, but I had a 2-week-old, so I figured this was all normal. And I woke up one morning and I couldn't see, and I ended up in the hospital, and my sugar was in the 7s, and I was in DKA, and they gave me a bunch of insulin, and they sent me home. And then my primary care physician gave me metformin, of course, because I was in my late 30s, so what else would he do? And said, let's see how this goes. 6 months later, my sugars were all in line. Nothing seemed, I had no symptoms. Everything was fine. And he started referring to this as, which I learned is not a thing, a diabetic event, which is some trauma to your body that causes a spike, but it's not actually a problem that you have. So again, we moved on. Now, this past January, I'm in Florida for business. It's our annual kickoff, yearly kickoff for the company. We all go to Tampa, and I feel terrible. Monday, I said, look, I'm skipping dinner. Tuesday, I went downstairs, and all of my coworkers looked at me in horror and said, what happened? And I said, I got a really lousy night's sleep. Why? I said, you don't look good. And they sent me upstairs, and I decided I was going to go home early, and I called my travel agent, and it took me all day to pack my suitcase. Every time I passed by the bed, I had to lay down.
Wow.
I was miserable. I was exhausted. And I had been losing a lot of weight again, and I had been very thirsty again. I had been urinating a lot again, all the symptoms. But at the same time, you mentioned I travel a lot. I came off of 75,000 miles of flight last year. I did like 19 business trips last year. And it was after the holidays. We just got back from a cruise. Of course, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
And I drink 1.5 gallons of water a day anyway because of fitness reasons. So, of course, I'm peeing a lot. Like, all of this just made sense. So I get home, and my wife takes me to my doctor, and he tests my blood, and the meter just came back with a absolutely not, get to the hospital. So that's what we did. And this time my sugar was at 850. and my A1C was at 14.2, and I flew home in DKA unbeknownst to me.
So you flew home in DKA.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
When did you realize how bad it was? Because I think we all do those things. Oh, I'm drinking a lot, so I'm peeing a lot. I'm just run down from the holidays. When did it hit you? Were you hospitalized when you landed?
On the way home. I had a layover in Charlotte, and I was just struggling to get from one gate to the next. And I knew that this was a problem. And my wife said, the symptoms, I think your sugar's high. And I said, here's the thing. I physically cannot get enough sugary stuff into me.
Right.
My body needed it. So I said, how could this be? How could it be high when all my body wants is I was drinking Gatorades by the bathtub full. I just couldn't get enough. So turns out, right, it makes sense that was happening to me, but obviously you're making it worse as you go. So it was on the way home where I was texting my wife, and I said, this is not good. I have a problem here.
Jason, I'm in Charlotte. You should have called me.
I should have. The next time I'm about to be diagnosed with diabetes, I'll call you first.
Sit down in a rocking chair at the Charlotte airport, and I'll be there in 20 minutes. Wow.
Yep.
That's unbelievable, though. But it's not. I hear all the time from adults who are diagnosed that it takes several diagnoses. It's often, as you said, oh, you've got type 2, or just stop eating ketchup, or stop eating dessert. You take the metformin, and you'll be okay. I'm curious, after that first time, or really throughout this, I've talked to other adults who've shared that they have had feelings of guilt, like they're not doing enough to make themselves better. The doctor said, take the metformin, cut out the dessert. I am, and I'm still not getting better. So they feel guilty. They're a bad patient. Did any of that go through your mind, or were you just so busy that you said, oh, all right, I'm going to get this when I get this?
Yeah, I had a little bit about that after the first time where, you miss a couple days of that, and you say, oh, I should be checking out my doctor, and I don't want to go because I haven't taken my medication. I know I got to do better. Yeah, and I did have a little bit of that. But then I kept checking my sugar, and it was fine. 110, 120, no matter what I'm eating. And I'm like, oh, well, I haven't taken metformin in a week. This is nonsense anyway, and it seemed to, quote, go away until just shy of 3 years later.
And I'm certainly no physician, but as you're listening, I wonder if you're thinking like I am, that this sounds like it was probably LADA, the latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. Did anybody ever say that to you since?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and now after this last go around, my endo is exactly saying that, right? That it is that. And she's also the only person I've heard do this. She calls it, it's not really type 1. It's kind of like type 1.5. Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, LADA is really fascinating. They're learning more and more about it. It isn't type 1 and it isn't type 2. It's its own thing. You treat it like type 1 as far as I know.
Right.
But in the medical literature, and I think insurance companies are going to be pushing, not that we need to talk too much about insurance companies, but they seem to be wanting this different kind of label. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But let's get back to you. So now you're diagnosed. It sounds to me like once you get that, you jumped right into, okay, this is now my life. What happened next?
So they sent me home with pens and a really rigid eating schedule, which I hear a lot of them do. But the great thing about my endo is that this was designed to be temporary.
Right.
So she said, I want you to do 35 carbs per meal, and I want you to use this scale, which I don't remember what it was, but whatever the ratio was at the time. 35 carbs, check your sugar, and then take the right amount of insulin based on that. And the idea behind that was that she wanted something to be a constant, which is a great idea, right? So, the blood fluctuates, the amount of insulin fluctuates. Let's not let the carbs fluctuate. So that was what we did. And we did that for not long, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, just to get some pattern of data. And with that, she said, here's your insulin to carb ratio. Here's your correction factor. Great. And we did that for probably another month or so. And then by March, sometime in the middle of March, I got my G6.
Ah. How soon after, because I know you have an insulin pump, how soon after did you switch to a pump?
And then the pump was maybe another month and a half later. Most of the waiting was really just the process. Scheduling appointments, getting the paperwork done, going through the pump training. There was no intended delay, right? We figure out the ratio, and then we move through the steps to get these two things, and Dexcom was just faster. But yes, by mid-May, I was on the Tandem T-Slim X2.
And the reason I'm asking about the technology is because I want to talk about all the travel that you did. So did you continue traveling at that pace?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, sure did. So I leave on Tuesday, and that will be, I believe, my 11th of the year of 2019. And it'll be my 4th domestic and 7 have been international.
What kind of work do you do?
So I'm in software, but I'm in the business side. So I go to our offices around the world. I visit customers all over the place. I'm in the customer success side of the business, making sure they're using everything in a way that makes them happy and works.
Got it. Okay, so let's talk about traveling with a CGM and a pump. What do you do? What's your routine at the airport? Right back to Jason in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. Do you know about Dexcom Clarity? It's their diabetes management software, and for a long time, I thought it was just something our endo used. But you can use it on both a desktop or as an app on your phone. It is an easy way to keep track of the big picture. I check it about once a week, and it really helps me and Benny dial back and see longer-term trends. Helps us not overreact to what happened for just one day or even just 1 hour. The overlay reports help put context to Benny's glucose levels and patterns. You can even share the reports with your care team, which makes appointments a lot more productive. Managing diabetes is not easy, but I feel like we have one of the very best CGM systems working for us. Find out more at diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. Now back to Jason answering my question about what he does at the airport.
So the airport's actually a lot simpler than people think. It's a little bit scary, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually fairly simple. I always, for starters, have a travel letter from my endo on me at all times. Just in case somebody from TSA is really confused, I have that. I've never had to use it, so everybody's been great. TSA almost always automatically recognizes an insulin pump, some even by the mile. So it's really simple. I walk up. I never go through the metal detector because I just know that's going to beep, but that's an automatic delay. So I always opt for the X-ray scanner. And as I'm walking up to it, I tell the person on the front side, I have 2 medical devices. Okay. They tell the person on the other side. As I'm walking in, I remind them 2 medical devices. I point to the back of my arm where I wear my CGM, and the left side of my belly where my inset is, and just to the left of that is where the pump clips on my belt. And I point to both of those places. They say, okay. When I come out, the screen lights up in both of those places. They make me pat them both. They swab my fingers, and they put the little cloth in the machine to measure it, and we go through. It adds 3 minutes, maybe.
Okay, so just to be clear, you go through the regular metal detector, not the hands-up scanner. You go through the hands-up scanner. Hands up. You know, you're not supposed to do that with the T-Slim, I thought.
That's what they said, and it's been fine.
Okay.
Because the metal detector, these things are full of metal. The metal detector will absolutely alarm. And if you do that, it'll alarm, and then they're going to have to do the pat down. Then they call for the assist, and they go through all those things. That's where you end up at 10 or 15 minutes delayed.
Yeah, but aren't you afraid you're going to fry your insulin pump?
I'm not.
Now, I'm with you. We're going to get a lot of mail on this. Mail to people write letters. We're going to get a lot of reaction to this because many, many people will say they won't go through anything with their insulin pump. You know, they'll take it off. They'll hand it over. I didn't realize, because I'm a terrible mother, we travel a ton. And what my son was doing, he would be kind of behind me in line or discreetly. He would take off his pump and throw it through the X-ray machine where the carry-ons go. And he has done this. I mean, he's worn an insulin pump for almost 12 years. He has done it forever. And I found out and kind of freaked out. And he said, what's the problem? It's fine. And I think, again, please look at whatever your insulin pump says to do. Go to the website, talk to the manufacturer. Mm-hmm. I think it's just a question that they haven't tested it, so they can't say it. But we've never had an issue. So I'm kind of glad to hear we're not the only rogue airport people.
I mean, if you think about it, the hands-up machine is an X-ray machine. When you take it off and you put it on the belt, it's going through an X-ray machine. It's the same.
All right. Well, we're going to get reaction, Jason. I promise you. Good. Okay. So you said the airports are kind of easy. What's not easy?
There's a lot of things, actually, that are not so simple. The right amount of supplies is incredibly challenging. You got to think about how much you need and then how much extra you want to have. If I need 2 sensors for the length of my trip, do I take 3? Do I take 4? How many can reasonably fail? I usually take one extra because in reality, I have a meter that I can use in a pinch. It's inconvenient, but let's face facts. It's fine. Right? So we can do that. Same thing with insets. I take as much as I need and a few extra. And I've learned a lot of these lessons the hard way. My first trip, I packed pens in my carry-on. They lost my luggage for 3 days. And I existed on 0 carbs per day because I tried to stretch the insulin as long as I could. I had one time only taken enough insets. And I stood up and I got off bed and I didn't have the pump in my hand. And the thing fell to hit the floor and ripped the inset out of my belly. Oh. And now I had 2 days shy of the right amount of insulin. And we just did some trickery with using 2 different tanks on the same inset. And I used the same site for 4 days and I tricked the pump, which I don't recommend, but in a pinch, it's what I had to do. Getting the right amount of insulin can be difficult. If I am midway through, I get 3 vials. So if I'm midway through that and I have a long trip coming up, insurance doesn't want to give me more early. So I need to call my endo, have a travel letter done that says I need it early. They'll always pay for it, but it's extra steps. So you can't think about that the day prior. And then keeping it cool is another thing. I bought a brand new backpack that has an insulated section in it. And in that goes my insulin, my backup pens, glucagon pen. It just all stays in the same place, and a frozen pack. And then I also bring several of the frozen packs that you crack and you shake up and they get cold, because when I'm on some sort of 15-hour flight, that frozen pack's not enough. And then I need to crack open another one. And I have to bring enough to get me home as well.
That's interesting, too. 2 quick notes as we're having just a conversation here. You can turn off the inset reminder on your pump very easily if you want to. If you're wondering, as you listen to what he was talking about there, the pumps will say, time to change your inset, or every 3 days you can put in a reminder. We actually never used that because when my son was little, we went through a period of time where we had problems keeping insets in for 3 days. Long story, we figured it out. We actually switched insets and they don't make the one that we had an issue with anymore. But we never turned it back on. Because we figured we'll just do it on our own schedule. I write it on a whiteboard. But, he's a kid and he's got a mom to remind him. But the other thing is, we don't keep any insulin cold anymore. It's just got to stay at room temperature. And I'm curious if you're concerned about it getting hot when you travel, or if it's just an extra precaution. Why are you so concerned with icing it?
So it's a couple of things. I know that the efficacy of the insulin doesn't reduce at a rate that most of us are terrified of, and it's usually okay. But when I'm in a foreign country and I don't have access to getting new insulin, just in case, and if, airplane temperatures are weird. So it's just about consistency, just that extra precaution, because I know the hoops I'd have to go through. I go to South America several times a year, and the healthcare down there is just not great. And I don't speak enough Spanish to really be useful. So it's just that extra level of protection. Nobody's going to fight this disease harder than we will for ourselves. So I just make sure that I take that step.
That's fantastic. And do you mind, I don't know if you know the name of it. I'm curious, what's the brand of the backpack? Like, what's the name? Because people are going to want to know.
Sure. It's Targus. A very popular brand in suitcase and backpacks. And the last thing, there's one more thing that's pretty challenging, and it's time zones, because I use the reminder. So for people that don't, maybe it's not as challenging. Because I do use it, it is challenging. So when I'm in London and it's 5 hours ahead, my inset changes at 7 p.m. When it's 7 p.m. New York time, it's midnight London time. So I have a couple of choices to make. I can either move it to 7 p.m. London time and lose 5 hours on that particular tank and inset, or I can leave it and then it goes off at midnight London time. I choose to do it at midnight London time. I don't mess with the timing on my pump, my body, everything stays the same. So at 7 p.m. New York time is when the pump rings, and it's when my body's at 72 hours. It's exactly that. And then I work around it. Like I said a minute ago, this disease doesn't work around us, right? So I work around it, and I make sure that everything is consistent as possible. And that's how I get the numbers I get.
That's really interesting. So when I think about time zones, and we don't travel as frequently as you do, of course, but we will, for spring break this past year, we went to California. We were talking about time zones, not because of inset changes, but just because of basal rates, right? And eating and that kind of thing. So what we do is, as soon as we get on the plane to wherever we're going, is we change everybody's watch to where we're going, and we change the pump to where we're going. because the airplane stinks anyway. I mean, you're just sitting around doing nothing. And that has helped us really kind of get our bodies, acclimated and just kind of force it to happen. Do you do anything like that for your different basal rates, or do you stay, okay, I'm in London, I'm 5 hours ahead, but I'm still going to treat basal rates and everything the same way as I would at home because you're not there for that long?
Yeah, I don't change really anything. The only thing I change is on the plane. And I have a very weird opposite situation from a lot of people. When I get very cold, my sugar drops. And I don't know why. But same thing. I work from home. I'm in my basement and I'm freezing. I'm in the low 80s. But a lot of people say when they get high, their sugar goes low. With me, when I get cold, it goes low. When I get hot, it goes high, which I don't understand. So on the plane, I have a profile on my T-Slim that says airplane. So I put my pump in that mode, and that lowers my basal rate because I know, and it drops it down by about 50%, 40%, I think, because I know that I'm going to be in the mid-70s without access to get up and go to my kitchen and get a snack.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're talking about is just trial and error and recognizing what happens to your body, and then being able to use the tools to accommodate that. And it's just remarkable to learn. I mean, the learning curve is steep. You're not even a year in, and yet, you've figured all this out. You've really taken the time. And I'm curious, advice maybe for parents, for adults with type 1 who don't necessarily travel the world and are forced to make these adjustments, but just living an everyday life. Can you share a little bit about how you figured these things out?
So there's necessity is the mother of invention, for starters, right? I have a young son. And I'm young myself, and I've got a life ahead of me that said, get it figured out, try it. And, we're very, very afraid of changes and fluctuations, and we have them anyway, so we try to minimize those as much as possible. I think what I learned quickly is that nothing is really a problem for a day. If my sugar's 300 today because I made a mistake, it's fine. Get it back in. Don't leave it there. Mine was probably 400 for 2 years. And before I ended up in DKA, it was when I first got out of the hospital, when it would hit 90, I was shaking like I was going to pass out because my body hadn't seen 90 in so long. It was super low to me, so, if you do drop down into 50 and 40 for a few minutes, it's also it's scary, but it's not that big of a deal. And it's easier to arrest a falling blood sugar than it is to fight with one of those stubborn, lingering highs. You're dropping down, some candy, right? Skittles. We all know the Skittles trick, right? That's going to help level you out real quick. But you eat too much ice cream, for the next 4 hours, you're fighting with this. They're like trying to get a fish into a boat, right? It's impossible. So I just kept doing it. And I knew that my endo was going to see me every 3 months, along with a host of other patients that she had. And everything she told me was referenced from notes and not her memory. And meanwhile, that's 90 days that I have in between where I could really be living so much better. So I just did it. I said, look, I got to get to a spot where I can live my life. I have a 90-minute commute when I'm not traveling. I come home to a 3-year-old that's got a ton of energy every minute of the day. And I said, look, I have to live a life where this exists as little as earthly possible.
Okay, so I want to follow up with your son, but let me ask you first about your commute. So tell me about that 90-minute commute, because you live in New Jersey. Are you driving to the station, taking the train to the city? What does that commute look like, and how do you manage during the commute?
Yeah, mostly I do. I drive a good portion of the way, and then I take a train into Manhattan the rest of the way. And it's interesting. You can really watch what happens. You can watch the walking and the last half of the commute, and my sugar goes down as I'm really moving and I'm exercising and I'm weaving through New York City traffic versus when I'm standing on the train or sitting in the car. So in the morning, first thing I do is when I get dressed and I walk out, I do like a small correction, just because by the time I get to work, I'm going to eat breakfast. So I do a small correction just to kind of get on the right track. And then I kind of like leave it between that correction and the walk at the last end of the trip. I'm really in really good shape. And as I come out of the subway at the very last spot, that's when I pre-bolus, because I eat the same thing every morning, so it's really simple. So I pre-bolus, I come out of the subway, it gives me 15 minutes to get in the office, sit down and have breakfast. And by 10 o'clock, I'm maybe cruising up to the high 120s, and that's the highest I'll see.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, because that commute, my dad did that commute for years and years, and of course I've done it, just knowing what it is, and it's a lot of moving parts. So it's great to have a routine. I'm sure that really helps.
Yeah, I have to. People say, eat the same thing every day. And I say, you know what? That's a small price to pay to make sure that my morning is stress-free.
Well, my dad did the same thing every day, but he played poker on the train. So, different routine. Tell me about your son. Does he understand what's going on with you?
So he's been probably the hardest part of all of this.
Really?
He is more astute than a 3-year-old should reasonably be. And when I was on shots, he would ask me when we leave in the house, Daddy, do you have your shot stuff?
Oh.
And it's adorable and heartbreaking at the same time. And when I put on insets or when I would give myself shots, he would ask me, does that hurt? And I would say yes. And he would say, I don't want it to hurt you. And he would really worry. And that's the problem for me because it's my job to worry about him. He's 3. It's his job to be carefree and not worry about me. At the same time, it's so sweet and so empathetic that he does worry that he can't do anything but hug him. And, I'm not crying. But yeah. But now he sees it and we play and we wrestle and the tube pump is a little tough when you have a 3-year-old, but he's aware of it. And when we go to bed every night, we would lay down and read him a story and he'll ask me, can you lay with me? Or is it medicine night? And medicine night means it's time for me to change my pump and change my inset. And he knows, and he asks me every night. So he's well aware. He doesn't know what it means. But on his birthday, I had a slice of cake. This is my son's birthday. I'm having cake. I don't care what anybody says. So, and look, he's born in April as well. So I was only a couple months in at this point. But I sat down and I had it. And I said, Nikki, Daddy's going to have some cake with you. And he said, it's a special treat when Daddy has cake.
Yeah. Oh, he gets it.
Yeah, he does.
Oh, man. I have talked to several people, adults with type 1 who have children who do not. And, they worry sometimes about going low. And the kids seem to pick up on that and really are helpful. Has your son helped you with any low blood sugars or anything like that?
I got to say, since basal IQ, I haven't had any.
Oh, that's great to hear. Love Basal IQ. Such a great software program with the tandem pump. That is amazing. And I don't know when this episode is exactly going to air, but fingers crossed for Control IQ soon. Come on, FDA. Before I let you go here, you mentioned that you work in software. And I don't know, customer happiness. I don't know exactly what you do. But I'm curious, you've had the tech now for several months. And a lot of people who come from software or come from technology get into diabetes and say, what is wrong with this stuff? Like, why doesn't it work better? Is that your experience? Because I feel like the last year or two, things have gotten a lot better, but there's a long way to go.
There's definitely a long way to go, and I can see it. And I feel like everything I read, we see strides towards that happening. My experience, I didn't have the G4 and the G5, so I kind of came in with this. The whole industry is a little bit more mature. So I've had a really great experience, but I also recognize that a lot of my success is luck. And I hate that it is. I work in the right industry that affords me opportunities to medical care and the understanding of data. People get all this data on their pumps, but they don't often know what to do with it, right? But I'm able to, manipulate it in a way that it makes sense and it's usable. And the difference between data and insights, right? Data is the information, but it means nothing unless you can pull insights out of it. And I have that ability to do it. And I think the next phase for the industry is not a better touch screen. It's not a smaller pump. The real next iteration should be making this data usable for people who are not like me, who are not an engineer by trade. Right? This should be somewhere everybody can look at this and know exactly what to do and when to do it and no luck required. That's
a great point because access, affordability, education, these are all things that we can tend to take for granted. Before I do have one silly question, so please forgive me.
Yeah.
Have you eaten ketchup in the last year?
Yeah, I eat ketchup, and you know what? I'd love to find that guy and tell him, here's my sugar, here's how much ketchup I had. Have a good day.
I love it. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Well, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me and sharing your story. Where are you off to next? You had told us that you were hitting the road again?
Yeah, I'm going to Boston for 2 days next week. I get back for a week, and I'm in Argentina for 13 days.
Wow. Now I keep saying this is the last question. You travel so much, I can't imagine you bring your son home souvenirs or anything like that, but do you have any kind of traditions or things that you do so he knows where you've been?
I don't do it. While I'm away, my wife does it. They have a small globe in his playroom, and we play Where in the World is Daddy, and points it out. So
that's perfect. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. A little geography lesson and a little bit of fun while he's missing you. That's awesome.
Yep.
Jason, thank you so much for spending some time with me and sharing your story. I hope that we talk again. I'd love to kind of, keep posted on your travels, and I'll let you know the feedback we get for the going through the hands up scanner at the airport.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Thank you so much.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
It is fascinating how everybody with diabetes makes their own routine, right? Everybody does things a little bit different. When he mentioned that pump inset reminder that Tandem has, and I'm sure other pumps have it too, it took me a second, you might even be able to hear me, to figure out what he was talking about. As I said, we never use that. I mean, it kind of threw me for a loop. He's so much more precise and consistent. He's all about routine. And we didn't even mention his numbers. I'm not big on sharing numbers, and we talked about that off the air as well. But Jason shares his A1C. It's very low. He's one of these high fives, low sixes kind of guy, and it is all about his routine. And while I respect that a lot, I mean, man, that is a lot of hard work. It is a lot of thought. It is not our life. But then again, I'm a parent of a child with type 1. I'm a parent of a teenager with type 1. Routine. Oh, what is that? But at the same time, obviously, Jason is really just doing an incredible job with a very difficult situation with all of that travel. So all the respect to him. So please don't yell at us for how we manage at the airport. I haven't actually admitted that. I think maybe I mentioned it once that Benny throws all his stuff in the X-ray machine with the carry-ons, with what was one of the Dear D-Mom episodes with Maura earlier this year. But I don't talk about it a lot because it's against the guidelines, right? You're not supposed to do that. And I wouldn't want anybody else having issues with their equipment if they followed something that we said. So I rarely talk about that. It has worked very well for us. But now that I'm the world's worst diabetes mom, maybe I can get away with sharing more of the nonsense that we have done. I do, speaking of the world's worst, I do have a whole chapter on travel in the book. And it's mostly about the ups and downs. We've had so many crazy things happen, not just flying, but on the road. And it's never a dull moment. I also need to thank Jason for all of the great work he does with JDRF. He's only been diagnosed for a year. His diaversary is coming up in January, but he has jumped right in to this community. He's raised a lot of money for his chapter, and he's really working hard. So Jason, thanks again for coming on, and thanks for all the great work you're doing. All right, time for Tell Me Something Good, brought to you by Real Good Foods. I was on their website the other day cracking up because they have Real Good Foods ugly sweaters. And yes, they are kind of hideous, but I think that's the point, right? I hope I didn't insult anybody. They have a collection of sweaters and other merchandise from Real Good Foods. They've got bacon and pizza all over the sweaters. Oh my goodness, really just have to be seen to be believed. But I go to the website because there is a locator for where I can buy Real Good Foods products. They keep expanding into more stores in my area, Publix, Harris Teeter, and Walmart. Those are the top in my area right now. I like to get the recipes because even though the products are already prepared, they can mix and match and do all this cool stuff with them, make them even yummier. And then you can find out about all the different products they have because while there's a great selection in your grocery store freezer, there is the full selection online. So find out more and check out those sweaters. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Real Good Foods logo. We have some really good Tell Me Something goods this week. I guess that's the plural. And the first is a diaversary celebration. Sergeant Major Mark Thompson, who we profiled in November, who was diagnosed with type 1 while already in the military and was able to stay in, recently celebrated his 19th diaversary, and he celebrated by completing a marathon. He wrote on Instagram that he completed another marathon, so I don't know how many he has actually run. He wrote on Instagram, "This wasn't my fastest, but no highs and no lows." And then he wrote that he didn't realize it was his diaversary until after the marathon. Quote, "I wish I was creative enough to have thought that far in advance to plan something cool. I'm just lucky." I think that's amazing. And I'm glad, I know this is going to sound terrible, that I'm not the only one who forgets the diaversary. I really do. For the longest time, we didn't even know the date. I just knew the first weekend in December because before social media, I don't know, it wasn't a thing. People didn't celebrate it. I think it's great to celebrate it, but it just didn't occur to me, especially when Benny was little and he didn't know anything from before. We still don't really celebrate it. I sent him a goofy text this year and he sent me one back. That was about it. All right, this next Tell Me Something Good is about an elementary school-aged kid getting a little bit more independence. His dad, Mike, who goes by T1D Dad Mike on Instagram, talked about how this was the first time that his son asked to walk himself home from school. He wanted to stop at the library. I saw the post, I reached out and I said, tell me more about this. Because first of all, I love a kid that just wants to go to the library, but I also like a kid who's pushing for more independence. So Mike shared that Ryan is 9. He's in 3rd grade and has been diagnosed for about a year and a half. They live in the Chicago suburbs. The elementary school is about 4 blocks away. And there is a major street that has a crossing guard during school hours, but none later in the day. So they made a plan. They put extra snacks in his backpack. He set an alarm on his phone, Ryan did, to remind him to text his mom once he's at the library, which is probably the most important part of all this, and then another alarm to remind him it's time to walk home. And he wrote, when he's having fun, he tends to get distracted. Right? Don't we all? And then he said it all worked out. And the best part is he did it again the next day. So Mike went on to say that he grew up walking to school, by himself or with siblings. And he really wanted his kids to have that experience as well. They're really close to school. So, they were worried about diabetes. And think back, 3rd grade is pretty young, but in our experience, 3rd grade is when all those independent things really start happening. Benny definitely wanted to ride his bike around the neighborhood by himself. He did not want me around at play dates and things like that. And my daughter was the same way. 3rd grade is when we made big changes at school at the start of them. It's not time for total independence. I mean, don't get me wrong. But it is a great time to start trying out new things. So congratulations to Ryan. Congratulations to Mike and your wife for letting him do that. It's a big step. And I think it's great and worth celebrating. Okay, so we have an adult with type 1. We have a kiddo with type 1. This last one is for all the type 1 moms out there. This is about being in a Hallmark Christmas movie. How about that? So Cammie Tepper, her son Clay, was diagnosed in 2011, around the age of 13. He is now 21, very successful college student. He's a very gifted musician as well. I've featured him on my Facebook page a couple of times. But this is about Cammie, and she was an extra in the Hallmark Christmas movie that was filmed locally with Kristen Chenoweth and Scott Wolf. It is called A Christmas Love Story, and it premiered about a week ago. But her husband set up a red carpet and, champagne. I mean, it was just so cute. And they posted screenshots of the scenes that she and her friend made it in. What a great experience. So congratulations, Cammie. I'm so glad you had so much fun. And part of the fun here was that they had to get really glamorous. They got dressed up in formal gowns for one of the scenes. And, just fun to go with friends and be part of something fun like that. Cammie, if the movies come back to town, let me know. I'll join you next time. Do you have a Tell Me Something Good story to share? Please let me know. You can post in the Facebook group. You can reach out, Stacey at diabetes-connections.com. We will be picking this back up again in January. It's interesting. This was a feature that I actually just started in January of 2019. That's the first year we did Tell Me Something Good. This has been the first year. And I wasn't sure whether to continue it, maybe do it monthly or, maybe find something else. But I did a poll in our Facebook group and people really overwhelmingly wanted it to stay. So it's in. So let me know about your good news stories. I think these days we all need some good news about diabetes or not. So please share your stories and tell me something good. All right, last planned show of 2019. I'll have a short episode 2 weeks from now, barring any changes, breaking news, or interesting developments. But I just want to take a moment to say this has been an incredible year. Personally, we had a lot of changes in my house. My oldest child going off to college, Benny starting high school, and just becoming more and more independent every day, which is great, but a little bittersweet. I think I have to talk about that at some point soon because I can really start to see the future now. And man, I'm so proud of him, but he needs me with diabetes less and less, which is the point, right? But I think that's going to be hard on me, and I'll be honest about that. So I'll talk about that down the road, but it's on my mind right now as we wrap up the year. As are all of the things I've done this year, which, I mean, it really has been a year of accomplishment. I know it doesn't sound modest to say so, but I'm really proud of finishing The World's Worst Diabetes Mom and getting it out there. It's been a goal for a while, and I'm really excited to continue to grow this podcast and tell these stories and reach more people and learn from all of you and continue to grow myself. So I know it sounds kind of hokey, but it really is how I feel. So thank you all so much. Thank you, John Buchanan, my editor from Audio Editing Solutions. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. Whatever holiday you celebrate, I hope you are doing it with friends, family, with love, with laughter, and with joy. I'm Stacey Sims, and I'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Quick disclosure, at times I may mention Tandem Diabetes Care. However, I am not compensated by Tandem for my actions, and Tandem does not support or control this content. I have created the content, and it is based on my personal experiences and observations.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.